Hello from London, where I had the opportunity to sit down in person today with my friend and legal ops leader, Ashley John, who is the head of legal operations at Anglo American. What is Anglo American? It is a leading global mining company and another one of those biggest companies in the world that you know, but you think you've never heard of. Their metals are the essential ingredients in smartphones, electric cars, wind turbines, and they also own a company called De Beers, of course, the world's largest diamond company. Remember that slogan, "A diamond is forever"? That's them. Ash is a legal operations leader with experience in orchestrating transformative change within large corporate environments. Leveraging a consulting background that spans diverse functions and sectors, Ashley spearheaded the establishment of a global legal operations function as part of the broader transformation at Anglo American. There, he has established the strategic vision, created fit-for-the-future legal processes and structures across the multinational team, thereby enhancing efficiency and fostering collaboration. Ashley's dynamic approach, cultivated through years of navigating different sectors, positions him as a catalyst for change, translating his consulting versatility into a deep thinker in the realm of legal operations. Prior to consulting, Ash came from a career in mining and geology, really unusual, and then, like so many of us, fell into this world. As a result, he comes to the profession with a keen eye towards examining the why behind how we currently provide legal services. Ash has always had a strong natural curiosity, and he has this desire to dig in and understand why do we do the things we do this way, and is very quick to be creative in offering alternatives. Today, we get into things like, why does it feel like some legal ops leadership roles are being eliminated at big Fortune 500 companies? And what can we do about it? The language that we choose to use in our industry, why does it hold us back? Including terms like non-lawyer or alternative when it comes to alternative legal service providers or alternative fee arrangements. And we tackle the big questions facing law firms today. Things like the billable hour, and the increasing pressures that AI is putting on all of us to rethink how the law firm business and the model might have to change. I had a ton of fun talking to Ash today about these big topics, and I'm excited to have you listen in. With that, on to the episode. All right, hey Ash.
Morning.
It's good to be here in London with you.
Glad to host you.
Yeah, it's always nice to come, but every single time I come, it's cloudy and rainy.
I mean, this is a good day.
Someone
it's
tried
not
to
raining
tell me,
yet.
oh, it's not always like this. Honestly, I'm
pretty.
here all the time.
Yeah, I mean, give it 10 minutes, it'll be raining, but we're doing okay.
Yeah, so nice new building that you guys moved into, Anglo American, De Beers, the mining company, diamonds. Do you give your visitor diamonds as sort of swag?
Oh, yeah.
You do the pearls when I'm happy to wear diamonds.
Spin-off podcast.
So I thought what we would do today kind of go through some of the hot topics that are on everyone's minds here on legal. You and I are both really active on LinkedIn. You see a lot of the chatter on social that people are chatting about these days. Most recently, I mean, today's the end of April. We're getting ready to have clock. You're going to clock?
I am. Yeah. Looking forward to it.
There's a lot of talk about companies, I mean, the economy, whenever something happens like this, economy down, you see roles eliminated. And there's also a lot of people adding roles. I actually just got pinged from a couple of recruiters this morning asking if I knew some roles. So you see both things, right? You see a lot of folks saying we need to expand, we need to do more in tech, we need to hire legal ops, but we're also seeing a bit of contraction. So particularly in senior roles where either someone is leaving or the role is eliminated and not being backfilled, even in Fortune 100 companies. How do you think this is happening?
To have 15 years in legal experience, blah, 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 blah. The reality is, if we go back to absolute fundamentals of what a legal ops role is, it's a change role. It's a change, as you said, change leadership role. It needs to be broad. It needs to have a lot of ability to understand supply chains and external markets and elements of procurement. It is a bit of a jack of all trades type role. And I think that's what's difficult about it, because it's very value if you have your one thing.
The specialization.
Exactly. Yes. So you are the ultimate generalist. And I think that actually works against
That's a good point.
people.
So how, as we try to help all the GCs and CLOs that are listening and wondering, okay, I get it, I want to hire this. How do I find this person? How do they hire? What should they look for? I agree, the generalist, but the generalist resume doesn't jump out at you. I do a lot of things pretty well.
I think transformative experience or transformation experience, sort of project director type roles where you work across a number of different disciplines and help bring things together to a shared outcome. I think if you start there, I think the value or the benefit of actually being willing to look outside legal, yeah, absolutely. I know I'm sort of spouting my own background a little bit here, but I talked to quite a few people, and you'd be amazed at how many people got into legal ops through a consultancy group or a change management type role and worked their way up, or things of that nature. Because actually, I hate to break it to a lot of people who might be listening, but legal isn't that special.
No, that's right. Okay?
It's process, people, technology, data. Maybe not necessarily in that order, but they're the fundamentals.
Yeah, which is so is every other industry, every other vertical.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on legal background being necessary, and even let's just start with lawyer background being necessary? Helpful?
I think it's helpful from an empathy standpoint, but I would question whether the empathy is outweighed by the institutionalization. Is there unconscious bias through your own lived experience of being a practitioner that means that you don't challenge strongly enough a status quo, whatever that status quo might be? So that's partly what I've enjoyed. Is actually I'm a geochemist.
I was the same. I didn't know anything
nothing to do with legal whatsoever, and actually that's helpful because I'm comfortable enough asking the stupid inverted commas question, but actually being able to just go, why? Why are we doing that? Oh, we've always done it that way. Ah, there it is. Okay.
And those aren't stupid questions. They're actually the right probing questions to be asking.
But being able to ask it from a genuine, authentic, I don't know the answer.
Help me understand.
As opposed to, I know I did this 10 years ago and I get it, but let me ask the question anyway. You get a different answer from people. So I don't think it's that. The willingness to immerse yourself and learn and be vulnerable in that space and be comfortable with that vulnerability is absolutely vital. But I don't think it's as important as some people make out.
Well, and I think you just answered my next question, which is, the lawyers will always turn around and say, how could you possibly understand what I do day to day?
Help me understand.
That's right. Let me sit in your shoes. Walk me through it. How do you do this? That's right.
With compassion and authenticity, but don't allow it to drag you in. You've got to be able, and it's slightly counterintuitive because I've just said don't be an island. But you kind of need to be, in a sense of an outside-in perspective is so powerful.
So it's okay. So we don't think you have to actually have been a practicing lawyer. What about just experience in legal? Maybe having worked as a paralegal or working at a law firm or working with contracts. Is that even important?
I mean, it's beneficial.
Nice to have.
Obviously, but I don't think it's a must-have. Because, as I said, process, people, technology, data. The rest of it is context. Actually, if you can do those, if you know how to build a culture, get people bought into a vision, and building skills and all of that piece, if you know how to transform, analyze, assess, transform process, and you know how to assess technology that will enable that, not necessarily tech first, but enablement of process, you can do that anywhere, really.
So look outside. And I couldn't agree more. And I try to tell folks this. As you're hiring, you don't need to look for legal background. You don't have to look for legal experience. And yes, it's helpful. It's a nice to have and fantastic if you find the unicorn who's done this already for 10 years. That also is very rare and doesn't exist. But look outside for people who have done things similar, but maybe not in your industry.
Absolutely. Because you get a unique perspective. We talk about diversity around sort of much more around physical characteristics, but there is an element, and I'm not saying it's more important, but having a diverse background is very valuable when it comes to transformation and change. And I think that's something that is not necessarily being thought about too much, is unlike lots of other professions, the legal profession, it's almost a single route profession.
Yeah.
If you look at HR or you look at tax, maybe to a lesser extent, but finance, supply chain, there are diverse career paths that get you to that. Legal doesn't necessarily have that. And there is that, I mean, there's literature out there that says law school changes the physiology of the brain, right? It's to that extent. We won't get into that. But you are looking at a piece of, you get a lot of people who have been trained to think in a very similar way, and you are in a confirmation bias echo chamber.
That's right.
And I think having someone who hasn't got any of that to be able to come in and not necessarily bulldoze through that, but be able to probe and be willing to be an outsider. It's insider outsider dynamics ultimately. Yeah. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah. So that brings us to the next controversial topic that everyone's talking about.
Oh, here we go. Go on. We're going there.
Non-lawyer terminology.
I'm not a fan.
You're not a fan? Okay. Tell me more.
I think ultimately nobody should be defined by what they're not.
By being a non.
Yeah.
It's
not anything.
Yeah. Just to back up, I guess there's been a lot of chatter externally, socially about should we ban the term non-lawyer in the legal industry, because where else do you have, doctors and non-doctors? We have lawyers and non-lawyers. So that's been the talk. And so you're on the fence of let's ban it.
Yeah. I'm not on the fence. I'm definitely on one side of, it adds no value. It's a lazy term that has unintended consequences. And I think if we're going to really acknowledge and recognize the value of everyone who isn't a practitioner, then we should do, and we should not be defining them by sort of second-class citizen status almost.
Yeah.
And I'm pleased to see that it started. I think we might have even had an initial conversation on it, but it's just, we don't need it.
So I don't like the sort of idea that because you're a non-lawyer, you're anything less than the lawyers in the room. Paid less, respected less intelligent. All those sort of implications I can't stand. That said, I do think there is a need for some term that
collective noun,
but distinguishes people who are not lawyers because of the idea of privilege, or that the work that can be done by certain role in person. And there's been talk about, let's use business professional, which is a fine term, but there are going to be people who are practicing lawyers or licensed attorneys who are now not practicing and are business professionals. Yeah. To me, my idea is you can't have a Venn diagram. It actually needs to be two separate buckets, right? Correct. You can't have someone who's in the middle. You have to have the lawyers and the non, and it's not the right term. Yeah. So do we need to come up with a new word for people who are not lawyers? And my sort of parallel is, in the military or the police, you have civilians. It's a perfectly fine word for people who are non-military or non-law enforcement, right? Yep. And there's nothing pejorative about that word.
Exactly. But it's a positive term, right? Yes. It's not a non-military. Correct. It is a term in itself. So
we have to make up a new word?
Well, just find one.
I think so.
Practitioner and professional, or I don't know, but something like that. I've tried very hard to move away from lawyer.
Okay.
Because there are people who practice or deliver the practice of law who aren't necessarily, trademark practitioners or patent attorneys and that sort of stuff. That collective noun is practitioner from my perspective, and this is just my own opinion. I think professionals or something akin to that is suitable.
All right, so we need new words to be made.
Yeah, comment in the thread. I don't know how we do this, Mary. You tell me, but
I think we take the word lawyer, reverse it, read it backwards, and that's culture.
We can try.
So on that same thread about the words that we choose to use.
The power of language.
Yes, the power of language. So you've written a few posts on this, and I love it. The other one that you commented on was the idea of alternative. So ALSP,
AFA.
The AFA, these are common terms for those who are new. It's alternative legal service provider, which is anything that's not a law firm that is delivering legal services. There's AFA for alternative fee arrangement, which is anything that's not the billable hour.
Sure, there's others.
I'm sure there's others, but your comments on why we should eliminate the word alternative.
it reinforces the status quo.
That's right.
Ultimately, you know, if you take it out of the legal profession and we start to think about the use of alternative, you know, alternatives music, alternative societies, cultures, all that sort of stuff, it is in effect away from the mainstream. Now, the unintended, the implied message there is risky, dangerous. Don't go there. There'll be dragons. The crazy people are over there doing something. And, you know, stay here where it's safe in the mainstream and we'll take care of you and all of that kind of thing. And actually, yeah, I don't know off the top of my head, but the ALSP market must be billions of dollars. It's huge, right?
And the way they define themselves is so broad.
Yeah. That's not an alternative market.
Right.
That is a fundamental pillar of the market itself. I don't think, you know, it's not a break-in or a startup, upstart even.
Yeah.
So calling it alternate, it was a valid term back in the day, let's be honest. When it was a break-in, it's absolutely fine to define it in that way. But times change, and I think that one especially we need to move on from, because it's just not alternative
It's
anymore.
not anymore.
And the same with AFA, right?
Yeah.
I think, to quote Chris Grant from HSBC, he spanned the term. I think he now has EFA, which I hope I get right, is either effective or efficient fee arrangement, because it's not alternative.
Right.
And actually, from my perspective, it's better.
Right.
You know, it's fundamentally, it manages costs, it could help control costs. It manages the risk potentially better than a billable hour where you're dependent on scope management and project management from the client side, which I think we can all do better at. So again, another example where at the time, when it was an insurgency concept, absolutely fine. But now it's just a fee. It's a commercial model. It's a fee arrangement. It shouldn't be defined as something difficult or risky or not the norm, because it is now. There are billions of dollars going through both LSPs and
LSPs. Is that what you're calling them? LSPs?
Yeah.
Legal service providers?
Collective nouns again.
Yeah. Liam Brown of Elevate, he tried to change the terminology to law companies, which I like.
Yeah.
So you have law firms and law companies. I think that works.
I think there's a UK firm or a firm we know in the UK that is sort of a professional services firm with legal at its heart or at its centre or something like that. So they've spun it in that way as well, because actually a lot of the law firms now have innovation services and all these sorts of things that are actually completely valid complementary capabilities to the practice and delivery of law.
Yeah.
But it's not legal practitioners marking up contracts or whatever on that side of things. So I think that there's direction to travel, which is encouraging, but I think there's still more to do.
So yesterday, on that topic, if we can go down that path for just a moment. Yesterday, here in London, I spent the afternoon at a FT roundtable with a bunch of managing partners from some of the biggest law firms in the world. And some of the commentary was the law firm of the future will actually not be a law firm because of all these other, not alternative, but other services that they're adding to it, advisory, consultancies, innovation arms, helping helping the client do more than just practice law, but really advise them strategically, which is what we've seen from probably the big four going the opposite direction. Right? What are your thoughts? Do you think that's true? Like where are law firms going to go?
That's following the trend of the in-house team, right? So the in-house team is no longer this silo inbox process outbox. They are a business partner, a business owner, an enterprise advisor, all of those terms. And I think that the law firms are seeing that happening and actually seeing GCs and CLOs moving from the classic sort of siloed advisor on demand to a business executive. And I think they're following that trend. I agree. I think diversification, I wonder whether it's, as you mentioned, the big four going the other way, whether that's actually creating an impetus, pressure, market pressure for the firms, the conventional law firms, the classic law firms to look more broad, or actually, are they just looking at it and going, well, the integrated nature of legal services, the way our clients operate, we can no longer be this tiny little pillar. We need to broaden and diversify to meet the demands of the complex nature of so many things that are being handled by the in-house team. I don't really have too much of a view on it, to be honest. I think change and progress is always good, and I think the pace that we're seeing things evolve, whether it's new regulations, the complexity of regulations, the integrated and interconnected nature of business globally.
Globalization, absolutely, yeah.
Nightmare for an in-house team
Yeah.
to keep on top of. So I think the ecosystem diversifying to be able to meet more of those needs through a singular channel
Right.
has to be a good thing because it simplifies the world for the corporate team.
And so what you just said, a singular channel, that's interesting because I think we've just talked about how the ecosystem has exploded. There's so many options now for an in-house team.
Yeah.
If you're a general counsel, you can build your in-house team, you can hire outside counsel, but now there's there's technology, there's flexible talent, there's law companies, there's all these different ways to think about how to right source your department. Law firms traditionally were the one option.
Yeah.
So what happens? I mean, I'd love to dig into this a little bit. Does the model change? Does the services that they offer change? And I think we're starting to see that. The billable hour, is that going to go away? So I know you have very strong views on the billable hour. We've been talking about this topic. I've been in legal for 20 years, and we were talking about it when I started. Is it going to ever die? Is it going to go away? And it's very resilient.
It is. It's great. It's sticky, that's for sure. Let's touch on the sort of the conduit point and the singular channel, and then I'll give some thoughts on the billable hour piece. I think we're seeing it. That diversification potentially by law firms is a way to make sure that they are hedging almost against the new entrants, LSPs, all of this. But actually, it's also client pressure, right? So clients are no longer, or even less willing, I would say, on a general basis, to accept the army of junior associates doing doc reviews in a basement somewhere, on by the hour. So there's a maturity of purchasing by the client side. I would like to think that maturity is accelerating due to legal ops coming in and not being as embroiled and as emotionally invested in the kind of person-to-person relationship. We can come in from add a bit of commercial tension in there without damaging the relationship side of things. But I also think that we have to evolve. The firms have to evolve, the clients have to evolve, because the budgets don't scale with the scaling of the work that's required.
Right.
So something has to give.
Yeah.
Right? And ultimately that is the price point of the work delivered. And I think that will be the thing. It's the one lever that a lot of clients don't use necessarily is actually the buying power and taking the time, because it is a higher effort state to unbundle a matter or look at it more on a task basis and go, no, I'm going to send that repeatable, low value, low complexity piece of work to someone who is set up to do it on a commoditized basis, versus I want the strategic advice direction from tier one law firm. On the billable hour side of things, we've done really well. We haven't touched on AI yet, so we were doing so well. But I do think in time that is going to have a sort of disruptive force on the billable hour.
I agree.
Because clients are understanding now that research does not take 2,000 hours. When we know how quickly stuff can get done, we're not going to be willing to pay the conventional way. And I think we're seeing with the investment that all the firms are putting into that sort of space, they get that.
They get it.
The bit that I still don't really understand is growth versus scale from a commercial model and margin standpoint. My background, I was always fixed fee, high margin, where I can do work efficiently in order to, the more efficient I am, the better it is for the company.
Right.
And the client's outcome is exactly the same. That mentality we're not seeing.
Yeah.
We're seeing still the target. I think the Law Society put a post out a couple of weeks ago that said productivity had gone down in the legal profession, and their metric was the average number of billable hours had gone down. So that was what they were equating to productivity.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I won't say what I thought when I read it. That to me is not productivity. That is that has no reference to outcomes. That is how much time has been spent doing things, not how many outcomes have been delivered.
Yeah.
And I think that, combined with the AFA, EFA, that evolution will be where that commercial model has to change, because it's also a well-being thing, right? The market is constrained from a legal practitioner perspective.
Yeah.
You've seen, I think the US law firms are taking trying to sign up first-year law students for their second-year summer internships or something like that. I saw, just bonkers. But actually, so if it's billable hour is in effect a fixed margin volume play. So the only way for a firm to grow, more people, bums on seats, more hours. But if you can disconnect that and focus on the outcome, you can make more margin on the same people by working more efficiently. And there was an event in London last week where I won't mention them because they asked us not to, but someone from the law firm side was on a panel and said the billable hour rewards the inefficient.
Absolutely.
But why are clients as a cohort? And I know there's ambiguity in certain places, and sometimes you just have to do it. But we are not holding people to account sufficiently as a cohort of people.
And why is it so hard? So again, I started in this world 20 years ago at a law firm. In my first week, I said, how are we getting away with this? Because the incentives are so misaligned. I said, how is it that the less efficient you are, the more the client pays? How does that make any sense? So from an outsider perspective, again, when you are not embedded in legal for this long, you come in and you say, this is bonkers, this is crazy. Why hasn't this changed? And yet we just talked about how sticky it is. Absolutely, there is a time and a place for billable hour.
Yeah, completely.
Completely. There's always going to be some percentage of the work that is always going to be billable hour. That makes sense.
And that's okay.
But a large amount of it should be some EFA, some fixed fee, some set budget. Is it because we have such trouble in this industry being able to understand how to scope and budget well and to set that fixed price? Have we just not been tracking what it should cost? And yeah, absolutely. AI seems to be the thing that is creating more conversation about the billable hour than ever, at least in my experience. And we've had fits and starts of, more work moving in-house. This is going to change things. I believe, like you said, that AI will start to force the conversation. Mm-hmm. But why has it been so hard? And even now, I mean, I just remember even when I was at Google talking to a firm and said, we'd like you to propose us an EFA, show me what this would look like on a fixed fee basis. It was so challenging, not just for the firms. I'll even say our in-house teams.
Equally challenging.
And our in-house teams would always say, I don't know if we're going to get a good deal. Let's just go back to the billable hour.
Yeah, status quo thinking, right?
Yeah, why do we struggle so much?
I think there's an element of, going back to what we were talking about earlier, there's an element of confirmation bias. When you were a practicing lawyer, as an associate in a law firm, I couldn't possibly think, one couldn't possibly think of how to do this on a fixed fee, but I don't know how long this would take.
Yeah.
Therefore, billable hour. I think I do think there's a point there around scoping, and as a profession, whether scoping, the ability to scope, how to define robust assumptions, how to actually manage change on the scope from sort of project management principles.
Absolutely.
I feel like that's an area of weakness, shall we say, of corporate teams in general sense, and it's all over the research and thought leadership. That is an element. Again, though, that's where legal ops can play a great role in terms of setting people up for success and actually helping to manage the delivery as opposed to the substantive decision making on the merits and the issue. Yeah. And actually, if you can get that partnership working where you've got sort of the delivery capability and the subject matter expertise in parallel, that's a really powerful model, which is in effect the entire business case for project management within legal. Again, power of language. Why do we have to put legal in front of everything? Legal project management.
I can't stand that. Yeah.
Project management within legal. We don't have tax project management.
That's right. I agree. Take it out.
But yeah, so I think there's a big piece around that. But actually, again, one of the ways that the technology can help the law firms, in my opinion, is they can actually put a layer of insights over the vast databases of time taken, timekeeper records and note and annotations and all of that. You put the background and the context of a case into a solution, crank the handle and it goes, we've done 9,000 of these that are 4,000 are basically similar. We estimate X. Your team that you might need is Y. These are the capabilities to look for. This is what you can automate. And all of a sudden, you're off to the races.
Yeah.
You're making margin hand over fist.
But
for the same outcome that the client is willing to pay for.
That's the key, and the client is willing to pay for it. In some of the conversations I've had with firms, they've said, okay, if we can do something, let's say, more efficiently. Let's say it takes us 5 hours less. That should free up our time to do the higher value work, to do the thinking, the synthesis of the information. Now, we take that 5 extra hours. We're still going to use them, but we're going to do kind of bringing it all together. And why does this matter to the client and delivering more value to the client? The question is the client willing to pay for that now because there's no...
Or work on another client.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. That 5 hours could be doing other work for another client.
And you still bill it, but you don't think about it as billing it. And I think that's the key. It always goes back to, is it a good deal? You know, when we used to talk about fixed fees, let's say between the client and the firm, you're going to do all your X type of work on a fixed fee basis. Yeah. The idea in every other industry around the world is you win some, you lose some, right? If you are thinking about it against the billable hour, there's going to be somewhere, wow, you've done this 100 times, I can do this in 10 minutes. Yeah. An outcome for the client, as you said, and they're willing to pay. Other times, wow, this is new, it'll take you longer, you're working from scratch, it's going to cost more than it would have on a billable hour basis, or the other way around. Yeah. But the point is, you know, they kept coming back to comparing it to what it would have cost on the billable hour basis, and then who's getting the better end of that deal. You know, do we win this time? Did the client win that this time?
Why can't everyone win?
And we get out of this mentality of comparing it to the billable hour and really thinking about the margins, efficiency, value. But I struggle with why that is so hard in our space versus every other professional services.
I wonder whether it's because structurally, and I am talking on no basis of authority here, just hearsay and conjecture from conversations, but having not been part of a firm of this kind, but when the individual performance metric is associated with the hour, nothing changes. Yeah. So if a law firm wants to do this, you're gonna kill it. Honestly, just go for it. If you were to turn that round and go, right, on a arbitrary rate basis, because every client will have different rates and all of that, which is probably why they stick to an hour, because it's a common denominator. Yeah. But if you had an internal rate, like an internal carbon cost or something like that, if you had an internal rate that you applied across the board for performance purposes only, and you applied that, you could take away the hour as the metric. If you flipped it and went, okay, the 2,000 hours that you work equates to Y margin target. If I then gave you that target and said, Mary, I don't care if it's billable hour, cap, fixed, contingent, whatever, your job, because ultimately as a practitioner in a firm, the job is to bring in profit. Right. So let's focus on that. Right. So Mary, you deliver Y however you want. If you've done one of these deals 1,000 times and you think you can do it on a capped fee or a fixed fee, and you can deliver it with 10% of the resources because you've got some of the tools in the tool chest, the methods sound, you know where the skeletons are buried, all that kind of stuff. Go for it. Yeah. You make 30% more on that deal from a law firm margin perspective than doing it on a billable hour. That's right. That's the way to break it. But until you break that paradigm of performance is assessed on hour and the hierarchy, that's the standard unit of measure in the profession. I don't know why, but that to me is the only way you're going to move away from it. Yeah, so interesting. I'll never forget my old GC would say, I don't care how long it takes you. If you pick up the phone and you call the other side or call the judge and you make this go away in one phone call, it's worth more than $1 million to me for that phone call, right? But this is the fascinating disconnect. It's actually the client's outcome. Whether you're absolutely right, make one phone call. If it goes away, I won't pay you the 6 minutes it took.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think there's some creativity that needs to come in. Yeah. And again, that creativity probably has to come from outside the sector.
Yeah. I think
try and really push against, but that's an uphill battle.
There is so much. And the structure and the incentives of how people are rewarded in the firms, there's so many things working against the change that it is going to take a lot of pressure.
And a reset in sort of financial and business acumen around how that interplays between the commercial profitability and the HR elements. It's not simple.
No,
it's not simple. But when you look at burnout rates and attrition from the profession, I mean, it has to have something to do with the fact that we're asking people in their 20s to work 18 hours a day, 6 days a week. I mean, that's not right, surely.
I recently spoke with a bunch of law firm associates because I wanted to get back in touch with. It's been a while since I've spoken to law firm associates about what do you do all day and how can tools help you and what are you struggling with? And when I showed them some of the capabilities that AI has, and they said, God, my entire day of what I have planned today would go away in a matter of minutes. We're talking 6 to 8 hours of work collapsed into a few minutes. They said this would change my life. I'd be happier, but they won't let me use it because they don't know what to do with the business model.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think eventually, and I don't think we're too far from this, eventually the digital native, I get the generations wrong, the labeling, but the digital native who's had it their entire
completely
formative life is going to rock up, probably having had access to it at law school, because I think the law schools are catching on pretty quick.
Oh yeah, they're starting to. Whether or not the law schools are teaching it, the young students are playing with it.
They're playing with it, absolutely, And there's some fascinating stuff that's being done by some of the business schools and law schools. You see it on LinkedIn and you're just like, what?
Yeah.
I think that will become a real differentiator. It'll be a USP for the employee value proposition of come and work with, we are digital first as a firm, as a company, as a client company, as a corporate. That has to be something that people are considering. And I think on the corporate side, on the in-house side, that is legal ops' challenge, is the in-house lawyer of now. Sorry, let me rephrase that. The external law firm lawyer of now, compared to what it looks like in the future, is probably less different than the in-house lawyer of now versus the in-house lawyer of the future. I think the in-house lawyer will evolve or need to evolve more. And to a greater extent as well than potentially the law firm.
And we've already seen that, right? I mean, even in the recent years, you've certainly heard of, as you're attracting talent or retaining talent in-house, one of the factors that they will bring up in interviews as a lawyer is, what is your tech stack? How are you using technology? Because they don't want to come in a job where everything is manual, especially if they've come from somewhere that has already digitized, and imagine going back to paper after you've digitized in your next job.
Thanks.
Thanks. And that's another, rallying cry for why you need legal ops, because it helps to retain the talent and keep you modern, up to date. And certainly, I think you're right that there will be pressure on the law firms, if not, there already is, to do that. But the pressure on in-house teams is stronger, and so they will always move first.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, the innovation cycles are getting shorter and shorter. All the pace of change and futurist curves and graphs and all that sort of stuff. But the reality is, it's going to happen to us.
Yeah.
Before, the OpenAI just took a bazooka to the professional world. You'd go and you'd have an anecdotal conversation with someone and go, what are your thoughts on AI, using it at work? It's like, oh, no, couldn't possibly.
Yes.
Meanwhile, they're talking to Alexa at home.
Yes.
They're using Google. All of these things were actually, the understanding and the tolerance is so wildly different. I think we're going to see an increased pace of disruptive change, not just normal change.
That's right.
If you can say that. To the point where actually one of the bigger challenges for legal ops is, how do you create a culture within the team that doesn't get change fatigued and has an inherent and underlying resilience and curiosity for whenever something new comes up, because new stuff is just going to keep coming
That's a
every
great
day.
point. It's a
So
great point.
how do the gone are the days of the 18-month implementation plan?
Yeah.
Because within 3 weeks it's probably obsolete by now.
That's so true.
So how do we get to a stage where people are just willing to roll with it and see the positives in the opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, the saying now is the risk of inaction is greater than the risk of action.
Yeah.
And so how do we create a culture of that? It's a great point. It's a mindset, it's a culture, and we
Absolutely.
have to really be conscious of setting that. And the ability to fail fast and move on is still Silicon Valley mindset.
And be willing. Failure is a fascinating topic in legal, isn't it? And that's, I think, where conventional practitioner thinking versus legal ops thinking, that's probably the first place it butts heads.
And perfection, right?
Perfection versus good, getting mucky with change, all of these sorts of things. And actually, the way that we are going to move forward as in-house teams generally is by creating environments where people can fail safely. Because failure, you can see them start itching when you talk to practitioners about failing at stuff, because it's just not.
Well, you hear that with Gen AI. It's not perfect. It's not good enough. I've run it twice. It gave me 2 different results.
Yeah.
That's not the point.
Yeah, exactly that. It's giving you 2 results that may be right, but ask it a better question.
Yeah. Well, and how long would it have taken you to do that without that anyway?
Precisely.
Did it get you closer to the end?
Yeah, and I think there is a perception around Gen AI that is slightly inaccurate, because when it first came out, people were like, this is going to, Google's done. But it's not trying to be that. It is not a knowledge solution.
That's right.
It's not a knowledge solution. It can do that kind of thing, but it is not designed to be a knowledge solution. It is designed to be an opinion solution, because it creates a version of knowledge that it deems right. So if you think about that in a human basis, that is an opinion. I understand this knowledge. I convey this knowledge in a way I think is appropriate based on input. That's an opinion. Now, a knowledge system can be right or wrong. An opinion system can be bad or good.
Okay.
And I think that if we can change that mindset, and obviously the branding around sort of co-pilot and thinking about it as that sort of virtual assistant or virtual co-worker really helps with that cognitive reframing, because actually it's important to not think of it as getting stuff wrong. Think of it as not giving you exactly what you needed.
Yeah.
But it's also not a mind reader.
Right. I mean, if I asked you to draft me an email right now,
Yeah.
and then I asked you to draft me an email tomorrow, you're probably going to send me 2 different things.
Exactly.
It's just like a human,
And to take that a step further, it's that one, you can write that first draft of the email, go walk away for half an hour, calm down, read it and go, I might not send that, and write something else. And it kind of works in the same way. And I think that's going to be a fascinating mindset shift for everyone involved in knowledge work, really.
What a fascinating time to be part of all this, isn't it?
It's mind-bending.
I feel like we're really lucky to be working
Yeah.
in an industry that is in need of transformation, and then to have it be disrupted so much from so many different angles.
Yeah, and I think it'll be fascinating to watch whether the profession as a whole, or whether it be law firms or in-house teams, are willing to look at the opportunity to leapfrog. Because we're kind of skipping a horizon a little bit, aren't we? So if we have the opportunity to leapfrog and just go, do you know what? We're going all in.
Yeah.
Let's have a go. That's going to be really complicated and probably really hard, but
exciting.
The exciting and the opportunity that represents is one that I didn't see coming 3 years ago. I mean, I remember being on a panel and there was, what's your big bet for 22, 23? And I just started to hear whispers about Gen AI, and I went, this is something. I don't know what, but there is something that is going to happen here. But I think, what's the next one? That's the question.
Well,
if you think about how quickly these things are coming around now,
what is the next one?
What's the next one?
But it's also leveled the playing field for, if you think about all the firms, the departments that are out there, and some of us who have been transforming them for 10 to 20 years, you're no longer ahead of everybody.
No.
The
And
person who hasn't even started.
That's the leapfrog opportunity,
Yeah.
right? You don't have to unlearn or unbuild anything to take this on.
And you don't have to do what the playbook that we wrote for 10 years ago. And that's, this is my next blog that's coming out soon. But that's the whole idea that let's hire someone that's done this before at another company so they can repeat it. Don't do that.
High point.
No, we got to have new ideas now because the game has changed.
Fundamentally, the game has changed. Yeah, absolutely. And that is extremely cool. But that's a mindset thing. We're sitting here and going, this is exciting, this is cool. I'm not, the team downstairs are really bought in and quite open and intrigued and curious, which is great.
It's terrifying too for a lot of people.
But there are a lot of people who are like, oh no.
Yeah. And I totally get that. What does that, when you start to think about what does that mean for me and my job, and do I have to learn a new skill set? Yeah, it is scary.
But on that, it's a mindset thing as well, though, because I can't remember the quote, which is not great, or who said the quote, but there was that quote early in 23 where someone showed Gen AI to doctors and they went, this is amazing, what can it do for patients? And then the same person did it for lawyers and it was, oh no, what will this mean for me? and whether that's true or not, or just Instagram hearsay or whatever, it is somewhat symbolic of the nature of thinking around the profession is actually how can we make it about access to justice? There's a huge piece, there's a growing progress and potentially around that.
I'm meeting someone about that today.
Brilliant, great. Democratization of legal, all this sort of stuff. But there are risks that come with that. And I think that for big corporates and other companies where it's, okay, we could roll out co-pilots or something like that, but how do we make sure that someone thinks using AI is a legal opinion or is legal advice from the in-house team versus it isn't the reality? And how do you build a kind of AI for legal by legal,
That's right.
and then for the business by legal, and keep those two things very separate?
Yeah.
That is a complexity that when you consider global natures of big enterprises as well, that you get into some headache territory very
Certainly.
quickly.
And none of this will be easy, and there's a lot of questions that still haven't been answered.
Yeah.
But I really believe that we will get there because we have to.
Have to. Absolutely.
And so
absolutely.
the question of how will this work, and if it will work, it will. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah. And willingness to lean into
figure it out.
We will figure it out eventually.
Well, actually, this was a really fun conversation.
We've covered some stuff.
I feel like we could keep going, but I don't want to keep you from your workday. And that was a lot of fun. Thank you for being really open, transparent, and sharing your sometimes unpopular opinions.
There you go. Sure, I've got a few more somewhere.
Until next time, thanks so much.
Thank you.